Why list? What are some of the good reasons to take listings? Why should we put something on the marketplace? What will that do for you and I? Why list? Creates inventory. Now, why is it important to create inventory? What's the big deal about that? To create inventory. Yes, go ahead. Okay, no inventory, nothing to sell. I'll buy that. No inventory, nothing to sell. What are some more ideas? Why list? Yes. Every lister becomes a buyer. A lot of people ask themselves in business, where do all the buyers come from? I mean, if you focus on listings all the time, how in the world will you ever find a buyer? Well, guys, the buyers are sellers. The most loyal buyer you're ever going to get in real estate is your seller who's turned themselves into a buyer. Think about it for a minute. You have a seller, you put their house up for sale. Have they signed a contract with you? Yes? Of course. Yeah, they put their house up for sale with you. And have you not performed? You brought a buyer to their house. You or somebody else. But anyway, the house went under contract, didn't it? It's sold now. They're kind of jazzed. They've seen some performance, and now they've turned into a buyer. Will they sign another contract with you? Well, sure. They've already signed one previously, and they also signed one with a buyer that you were nudging them to do. So they sign a buyer's contract with you. Sellers are less reticent to sign buyer's contracts than just some buyer that walked in off the street. They will remain loyal with you because you've already performed for them once. Sellers turn into buyers, and they're your very best buyers. Do you know how much they're going to net out of the transaction? Do you know when the transaction's closing? Who knows their housing needs better than you? Your very best buyers you will ever have are sellers. Great point. What are some other great reasons to list? What about name recognition? Get your name out in the community. If you want to become a known commodity in real estate, if you want to become known in an area that you're the person they should call if they want to sell properties, you need to get some listings in that area. Because it's the listing agent who gets all the glory, isn't it? Whose name goes on the sign? The listing agent. The reality of life is that somebody else may have already sold that listing, or somebody else will sell that listing. About 80% of your listings are sold by somebody else. If that's the case, who still gets the credit for it? The listing agent. And that sold sticker goes on the sign. Oh, look at that. This particular listing agent sold another house. The reality is somebody else sold it. It doesn't matter. You caused it to get sold. Name recognition comes from having listings. What about sign calls? Pretty tough to get sign calls if you don't have what? Listings. Sign calls come from people driving through a neighborhood, seeing your name on a sign, and then calling. If your name is not on the sign, are you going to get a sign call? No. When I was new in the business, I worked real hard. I was always listening to things about real estate, instructional materials, or reading books, and I was really trying to flatten that learning curve and learn as much as I could. And I got to a point where I thought I really knew a lot of stuff, my own humble, non-humble kind of way. There were some other people in the marketplace that had gone through real estate school about the same time I did. They'd gone with different companies, and they didn't know much stuff, and they didn't try to dig into the business deeply like I did, and yet they were still doing a lot of business. And it really used to kind of bother me in my own humble, non-humble sort of way that people would go do business with them when they could come do business with me. And then it dawned on me one day, the reason why people were calling them is because they had a lot of signs out. And the reason why people weren't calling me as much is because I didn't have as many what? Signs out. I mean, I figured it out sooner or later that if I got more signs out, more people would be calling me too. You can't get listing sign calls unless you have signs out. How profound! I figured that out. Can't get sign calls unless you have signs out. Why else should you list? What about double commissions? Double bubbles when you get both the listing and the sales side. That's kind of fun, isn't it? You'll find that if you do that, of course, your listing commissions will go twice as far. And the other agent involved, they're easy to get a hold of. They're very cooperative. You think a lot alike because it's you. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. But one thing for darn sure, if you don't have the listing, then you don't have the opportunity to sell your own listing, do you? So you have to have the listing in order to get both sides of the commission. Why else list? What are some other great reasons to list? Well, what about leverage? Now, we learned about leverage in pre-licensing school, didn't we? Leverage is the use of other people's money to control larger assets. And if you had $10,000 to invest, it'd be better to, perhaps in some cases, to buy a $100,000 asset and borrow $90,000, because if the $100,000 asset goes up 10%, all of a sudden you've doubled your equity. Well, that's great. But with that $90,000 loan came payments in the $90,000 loan too. So leverage has a back end. But when you think about listing and the leverage you get from listing, it's phenomenal because there's no negative back end such as monthly payments. Now here's what I mean. Let's say that you have a buyer in your car. How many chances do you have to make a commission if you have one buyer in your car? One chance. If you have 10 listings and one buyer in your car, how many chances do you have to make a commission? 11. Because the 10 listings are working for you. I see you had a little problem in math, didn't you? Why do you have 11 chances? Because you have 10 listings sitting out there with 4,000 other people off the board or realtors that are trying to sell it for you, plus you have your own buyer in your own car. Point is, if you want leverage in real estate, get listings. There's nothing quite as exciting as going on a lovely vacation. I mean, you pack up your sweetheart and the kids and fly to the Virgin Islands, or you go take a cruise, or you go to Disney World, and you come back from your vacation and 2 of your listings have sold, paying for the vacation. Now, that is a nice experience. But it won't happen unless you have what? Inventory. Years and years ago, when I was living in Colorado, my next-door neighbor owned a Chrysler dealership. His name was John Miller, and John was a really nice guy. These were the dark days of Chrysler. These were pre-Iacocca. And Chrysler had these big cars sitting in the showrooms, and no one was coming to buy them. And most all the sales force had quit, and it was really a dark time for John. I'd go over to the dealership. I'd walk in to take John for lunch. And you could hear your footsteps as you walk through the showroom. They were kind of echoing through. And I'd go, John, 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 John. It's Rick, 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 Rick. And then John would come out, you know. And then we'd go to lunch. And we'd talk. And I'd say, John, how much inventory do you have? And he'd say, well, I got about $3 million worth of inventory. I said, whoa, that's quite a nut to crack. And prime at that time was 21% or some ridiculous thing. And John was paying 2% over prime. I said, holy cow, John, let's figure that out. He says, no, let's not. You'll ruin my lunch. The carrying cost on that inventory was phenomenal. I started thinking about my inventory in real estate. I had a little over $3 million worth of inventory at that time, too. And I got to think, what are my holding costs compared to John Miller's on his cars? Do I have to floor my real estate? Do I have to go out and get these large bank lines of credit in order to buy the real estate to put it on the market? No, I didn't have to do that. Well, I did have my Mls Dues. It was about $40 a month. And I did have maintenance on my signs. I mean, occasionally someone might steal a sign or something. Didn't happen very often, maybe, once in the spring around graduation time. Then I could usually go get them over at the high school. But when I thought about it, what a great business. All I had to do was have a little bit of chutzpah, a little bit of stick-to-itiveness, a little bit of courage to go out there and ask people this with me, wear out a little bit of shoe leather, have very minor expenses, and have millions of dollars worth of inventory that really wasn't costing me very much at all. That is leverage. Because every time some of that real estate sold, I got a percentage of it. Now think how exciting that is, where you can go out and get millions of dollars worth of inventory and get a percentage of it. Listings give you leverage. They give you the ability to use other people's money that they've invested in their real estate, market it for them, and get a what? A small piece. Now that's exciting, because these small pieces today equate to big commission checks. What about this? Listings build consistency. One of the problems we have in real estate is that it puts a lot of people out of the business. They make lots of money, high income, and then they make nothing the next month. And then they make high income, and then they make nothing. And it gets people out of the business. One of the reasons why you have inconsistent income is you have fewer listings. You need to put yourself in a position where you can have opportunities to produce income without getting out of bed yourself. If you are dependent entirely upon what you personally are doing with buyers, your income will be more inconsistent. If you put yourself in a position where even if I wasn't that productive, at least 3 of my 10 listings were shown, which could result in 1 offer. then guess what? You have more consistent income. The consistent hitters in our business are people that do what? List. I know that a lot of you, when you got in this business, didn't think that was the real estate business. Most people, when they get in a real estate business, have this perception of what the business is all like. And what they perceive the real estate business to be is a business where you have a nice car, and you go out and you find nice people, and you put them in your nice car, and you go look at nice homes, and they make great offers, and they're accepted, and you get another nice buyer, and you do what? You put them in your nice car, and you go out and you show nice homes again. And that's what you think real estate is about. But when you get into business, you find out that's not the real estate business. The real estate business is finding people that want to market their properties, taking a listing and putting it on the market. And then you go find other people that want to put their stuff on the market. That's the real estate business, because it's controlling inventory. When I was a manager years ago, I had one of my sales executives come in, and she was crying. Gosh, what's the matter? What can I do to help? And she said, you know that buyer I lost about a month ago? I said, yeah. Well, they bought a house. Well, you knew that was going to happen. I mean, eventually, buyers do go out and buy. He says, yeah, Rick, but you don't understand. They bought the same house I had under contract with them before. Now, that requires some explanation. You see, what happened was she had this buyer, and she was running them around showing them houses, and they found one they wanted to buy. And she made an offer, and it went under contract, which means it was accepted by the seller. But the listing agent was one of these, well, I call them obstructionist. And you'll meet people like that in the business. You try to do a deal with one of these people, and they have 50 reasons why it won't work. Instead of focusing on what can we do to make this deal happen, they focus on the fact that, well, I could see 50 reasons why this won't work. And sure enough, self-fulfilling prophecy, it won't work. Especially when they're dragging their feet the whole way, telling the seller it won't work the whole way through, and doing everything they can to throw up obstacles to make the thing work. They think their goal in life is to keep this property on the market. That's not your goal in life. Your goal in life is to get this property off the market. They've got it mixed up. Well, this agent was one of those obstructionists. And not only that, he wasn't even nice. It reminded me of that guy on Cool Hand Luke all those years ago. You know, he looked at Paul Newman and says, oh, I'm one mean, and you know the rest of it. That's the way the guy was. Because of his lack of effort or negative efforts, the deal fell through. Sometimes when your deals fall through, your buyer loses confidence in you. And they have to have someone to blame, because it must be somebody else's fault. And so they're going to blame you. You're going to lose the buyer, which is what happened to her. She got over that. But the buyer went out with other agents, and they looked at other properties. But eventually they ended back at that same house she'd had him under contract with previously, only this time the other selling agent had enough strength to beat the listing agent into submission and make the deal close. And that's why she was upset. Now, there's a moral to this story. If you want to be one of those kind of people, be a listing agent. Because who still got paid? Ooh, who caused the deal to crash and burn in the first place? The stupid, obstructionist listing agent. But who still got paid? If you want to put yourself in a position where people have to do business with you, whether they like you or not, be a listing agent. I'm not saying that you should go out and be an obstructionist. I think you should be a catalyst. I think you should always try to figure out ways to make deals work and be pleasant and cheerful and fun to do business with, because I think you'll do more business. But not only that, but you'll make it a better world to live in. There's a sales trainer out there in the marketplace named Mike Ferry. Mike Ferry's done a lot of research into top producers. This is his niche. He likes to work with superstars. And he used to hold what was called superstar retreats. Well, in 1988, he held a superstar retreat. A few years ago, he had about 1,650 superstar agents that showed up at this retreat. In order to go to these retreats, even to qualify to pay Mike the money to go, you have to have an affidavit from your manager that certifies that you did at least $1 million worth of business. Otherwise, you can't even come. You can't do that. You have to be a superstar in order to go. He surveyed all the people at his superstar retreat, and he found that the average sales price of the homes that they were selling was right at about $92,000 in that range. The average income to the agent themselves, the money that the agent actually made, was hovering right at about $100,000. That was good money in '88. Of these top hitters, What percentage of their business do you think came from listings as opposed to working with buyers? What percentage of their income? Take a guess. It was almost that percentage. It was 78%. 78% of their income came from what? Listings. Came from working with sellers. In 1990, he had another superstar retreat. He had over 2,000 agents there, about 2,100 plus agents. Of these agents, the sales price had gone up to a little bit over 100,000, and their incomes had gone up to about 105 or so, and then it did hit 80%. 80% of their business came from what? Listings. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you want top income in real estate, like all these hitters have, what do you think you ought to do? Work with buyers or work with sellers? Work with sellers. It's just that simple. Well, then whoever sells anything. We're not discounting buyers. 20% of your income can come from buyers. There are some agents out there in the marketplace that absolutely love buyers. They'll focus most of their attention on buyers, and they'll be selling your listings, and that's okay. Plus, your sellers turn into buyers, and you'll take your sellers out and sell them some stuff too, won't you? Some people are buyer brokers exclusively, and they only like to work with buyers, and that's okay. You'll hear a lot of top hitters in the industry that say that I do not like to work with buyers at all. Why? That's not where the money is. Exactly right. The money is in getting inventory and putting it on the market. Getting other people to sell your listings. How do buyer brokers make money? They work with lots and lots and lots of buyers. I know a lady, really good real estate lady, her first year in business made over $200,000. All with buyers. Now, how did she do that? She niched in with 3 top listing agents in her office, who none of which wanted to work with the buyers. And she made a split with them where they would give her their buyers. Now, think about it. If you had perfect primo A buyers to work with every single day. Now, what is a perfect primo A buyer? The buyer that already owns a property now, has listed it for sale, it has gone under contract, he's going to be on the street in 45 days or less, he has a lot of equity, and he needs to buy another home right now. So if you had niched in with 3 top agents in your office who were taking between 10 and 15 listings a month, and let's say each of them were selling 4 or 5 a month, that's a dozen or more buyers every single month that are not first-time buyers, and I'm not knocking first-time buyers, but everyone in the industry will tell you that a buyer with $50,000 equity to buy a home is a little easier and quicker and more of a sure deal than one with $5,000 or $500. That just makes sense, doesn't it? They may be a good buyer, and they may have serious intention, they may really, really want it badly, and they may buy a home. That's true, and they will. But the better buyer is the one that has the $50,000. They're buying more expensive homes, so therefore the commissions are bigger. The deals normally close. They're more stable. So I'm not knocking the first-time buyers. I'm just saying that she didn't work with that many of them. She worked with all upgrading buyers, and they were handing them to her on a plate. And so in the morning she had a schedule to work with one all the way up through the afternoon. In the evening she worked with a different one, and every day went like that, and she worked every day, 7 days a week for a year. She did hit the wall and had to take some time off, but she could afford it. And she flew to some tropical paradise and laid on the beach for 2 weeks, and then came back ready to do it again. You can do well, and there are people that will focus it on buyers, and that's okay. I'm just saying if you want to have a life, maybe you want to work with listings. Which brings us to our next why list. Do you want to have a life? Let's say your daughter is doing a dance recital this evening. And she's been working on this for months, and her little dance troupe or whatever, and she's so excited to have you there, and you're excited to be there, and your buyer calls. And what does your buyer say? I found another house I really want to look at, and I need to look at it when? Tonight. Because to your buyer, what is the most important thing in the universe? I need a house, right? And darn it, if you're not willing to work with me, then I'll find someone that will. And they could give a hang about your anniversary, your son's soccer game, your daughter's dance recital, because what's the most important to them is what? A house. I've got to get to a house. And you need to drop everything to work with that buyer. Otherwise, what will happen? They'll find somebody else. Now, occasionally in your career, I've had it happen once, but occasionally in your career, you may have someone that calls and says, I have an emergency listing. I want you to come over and list it immediately, right now. Could you drop everything and get right over here? Boy, they want to get out of town fast or something, I don't know. For the most part, people will list by appointment. Couldn't you say, great, I'd love to come over and list your home this evening, but, it'll have to be about 9:30. Would that work okay? Well, sure, the kids will be in bed. Just drop by then, that'll be fine. Or how about 6 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning before you go to work? Or can I meet you at work? Why don't we meet for lunch? See, it all works, doesn't it, if they own the house. But if they're a buyer, they're extremely demanding on time. You want to have a life? Take a lot of listings. You don't care about your life? Work with a lot of buyers. Your life will become their life. Your life will become one of indentured servitude to your buyers, which is okay, because that's what we're all about. We're all about providing service. And normally we do work when other people are off work, right? But if you have a family and other responsibilities, you want to maintain a little sanity, do a lot of listing. What about control of time? How long does it take to do a listing presentation? How long would it take you to go and do a listing presentation? 15 minutes? Okay, that's right. Anybody else have an idea? How about a half an hour? That's right. How about an hour? Okay, they're all right. Different presentations will take different amounts of time. But we're going to teach you here a way that you can get in and out in about an hour or less. I don't think it should take more than an hour, but sometimes it will. Sometimes you have personality types that just want to talk. And you'll know when you get there. They're very amiable type people. What will happen is you'll go to the house and there'll be a long hallway, and there'll be like 30,000 pictures in this hallway in frames all along the wall. And as you start to walk down the hallway, they'll say, oh, well, here's Johnny when he was first born. 13 hours of labor, let me tell you. Boy, it was really something. And on and on and on. And then, and here's Johnny when he first started to ride a bike. Here's Johnny when he graduated from high school. Here's Johnny when he graduated from college. Here's Johnny a little later. Here's Johnny when he got married. Here's Johnny when he got divorced. In fact, here's Johnny. Johnny, this is the realtor. He's living at home now. And talk 3 hours later. They've not talked about real estate at all. They'll say something like, well, shouldn't we sign something? And you get the form out, you lay it on a desk, they sign it, you walk out. You can talk about real estate. But they're amiables, and sometimes it takes a little longer. But most people, you'll find you can get in and out pretty quick. Even the amiables in the 90s have had to shorten their conversations because everyone's so busy. We'll teach you how to get in and out in about 45 minutes or so. How long does it take to work with the buyer? You'll find that it takes days, sometimes weeks, but days for sure, right? Unless they call in a sign call, and they say, gee, I'm around the corner to 7-Eleven, could you meet me at the house? And you meet them over there, and they walk in and they say, oh, I love it, and they buy it, and that's good. That happens. Happens a lot if you have signs. Well, it happens a lot whether you have signs or not. It's just happening to other people. But most buyers take what? Days. In 3 days, if I could line them all up, I could take maybe 6 listings easy, right? If I could line up all the appointments and everyone wanted to list. Or I could work with one buyer. Which do you think would be the most probable position to be in for income? Listings. Listings. Listings, listings. The old adage in real estate is, if you don't list, you don't last. Somebody said eat. Well, that's true too. But if you don't list, you don't last. Listings give you something to hold open to attract other buyers. Listings give you something to anchor your business on. They give you something to promote. Listings are the lifeblood of our business. Where can I go out and get these listings? If listings are so important, how do I get them? I like to do a little gold prospecting, and I find gold normally when I go. But there's an old adage about gold prospecting. Gold is where you find it, and so are listings. When you go out prospecting for listings, they're just wherever you find them. Where do we find sellers? Well, probably where there are houses. The marketplace tells us that if you study it, through the census tracts and other types of statistical analysis, that about 8 to 10% of the people are moving at any one particular time. That means 90 to 92% of the people out there in the marketplace don't want to move or don't have a real estate need or don't want to sell. Well, what do these 8 to 10% of the people look like? Who are they and why are they moving? Sometimes they'll identify themselves to you. There's two easy ways that you can identify listings where the sellers themselves will come forth. The first one is expireds. An expired listing is something that has been on the market previously, but it failed to sell. In an expired listing, you're going to have a seller that's a little bit disappointed. Their listing did not sell. What is the fundamental, number one, primary reason why this listing did not sell? Overpriced. The seller's going to think it was anything other than the price. Lack of advertising, lack of effort on their agent. My agent didn't do anything. It's the agent's fault. I listed it with a bum company, whatever else. But the primary reason it did not sell, in most cases, is the property was overpriced. But nevertheless, if you get on your computer every morning and search the update function and ask what properties last night at midnight, or whenever your board computer cycles it, what properties came up expired, you're going to have a whole new list to work on every single day. Right now, the expireds in the Salt Lake board are running around 500 a month. 500 listings a month that did not sell, primarily because they were overpriced. That is one source of listings. Now, I want you to know that when I started in the business, I never worked expireds. I made a very successful business in real estate. Won Rookie of the Year, made lots of money, and never worked expireds. But then I did something which some people would consider foolish, but I considered a new adventure in life. I moved. And I moved from Colorado, leaving my business in Colorado and coming to a new market where I was virtually unknown. And that's a big difference, because when you move into a market where you're virtually unknown, no one calls you up to say, oh, hey, you came highly recommended, or remember me, we did some deals a few years ago, come list my properties. I didn't have any of that going for me. And I was over here working hard to get things going. But one of the things I'd always learned in the real estate business, as well as any other business, is you never have to reinvent the wheel. What you can do is go and see what other people are doing and then kind of copy that. And if it's working, it'll work for you too. There was a gentleman named Ron Gary. And Ron had been the #1 top listing associate, and that got my attention. I went and talked to Ron. Here's a guy that was making probably at that time about $250,000 a year. I'd call him and say, Ron, you don't know me. I've come from Colorado. I was a broker there. I'm a new broker here. I'd like to come talk to you about what you're doing that makes you successful. And he says, well, sure. I've got some time on Thursday. Come on up. I'll block out an hour for you. And I drove up to Ogden and I met with Ron. Now, isn't that neat? I mean, where else can you go in a business where you can go talk to someone in our business who has distinguished themselves by becoming the best in whatever category that it might be? And they'll actually sit down and talk with you. Now, when I went up and met with Ron, he said, here's exactly what I'm doing. Here's the letter I'm sending out. Here's how I do it. Here's the form I use to keep track of these things and everything else. He gave me everything that he was doing. And I was really surprised to learn that what he was doing was expireds. I had to really do some soul searching here because I'd never, ever worked expireds. I had a bad opinion of people that worked expireds. I thought there were people that went out and just scurried around looking for leftovers. I didn't like that idea. And I'd had a bigger brother, and I didn't like leftovers, except for when he gave me his car. I like that. So I always viewed expired as kind of like leftovers, but I had to take another look at it when the top guy said, this is what I do. And so I started doing expireds. And I was getting 11, sometimes 14 listings a month. There's nothing magic about doing expireds. I'll give you a couple of simple tips. Tip number 1, if you're going to do expireds, do it consistently. Don't just try it for a week and not do it anymore. Make a commitment to yourself that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it for at least, let's say, 6 months. I'm going to start out, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for 6 months. No matter what happens, I'm going to stick with it. I'll tweak it a little bit if it's not working. I'll try some different approaches, but I made a commitment. And then make a commitment to yourself, and then do it. Rule number 2, if you're going to work expireds, you have to do it on a contemporaneous basis. Got to do it every day. Don't wait till the end of the month and then take the expireds for the month of May and then send out information to those people. Because most expireds will make up their mind what they're going to do within 3 days of expiration. They've already decided what they're going to do. It's too late. You got to work them every day. The expired's expired last night, you've got to work today in one way or another. What happens is you pull the computer listings that expired last night and you do something about them today. Let me tell you what I did. I sent them a letter. The letter just said, gee, your property is expired. You probably have some strong feelings on why it expired. Do you think it was lack of advertising? Poor promotional effort on behalf of your listing agent? Company was too big, didn't pay attention to you. Company was too small, didn't have any facilities or resources to get your property sold. Maybe it was the price. Had to throw that in, you know. Whatever it was, you and I can get to the bottom of it. And then I talked a little bit about what I'd done. Now you could talk about what your company has done. And I said, let's get together and we'll talk about it. And then I gave him a list of testimonials. You need to start getting a list of testimonials together. Some of you come from very successful business backgrounds, and the testimonials you got from friends and customers and clients there are generic enough to use for this. I mean, Susan, a real go-getter and lots of integrity. Loved working with you. Now, that may have been your Mary Kay business. I don't know. But it doesn't matter, does it? You're still a go-getter and have lots of integrity. So get some testimonials put together. One transaction could give you several testimonials. You can get a testimonial from your client, the buyer. You can get a testimonial from the seller, even though they weren't your client. You still sold their house, didn't you? You can get a testimonial from the title company. That's one of the easiest ones to get. They'll say anything you want them to say about you. And you get one from the lender. There's 4 testimonials from one transaction. Get some testimonials. You only need about 8 or so. And then put them in with your letter and send them out. If you don't have them, just start without them. After I sent the letter, on a lot of them, that's all I did. But on a lot of them, I also called. The ones I didn't particularly care about, I wouldn't call. But the letters went out anyway. The ones I cared a lot about because it was a target area I was working in or whatever, I would call them. And it's a very easy script. Hello, this is Rick Roller. I recently sent you a letter about your property. Did you get it in the mail? And they might say, yes, I did. Or they might say, no, I didn't. It doesn't make any difference. If they say, yes, I got the letter, then I might ask them, did you have a chance to read it? Or I might say, great. What the letter said was, you and I can figure out why your home didn't sell. Let's get together and do that. If they said, I didn't get the letter, it says, well, that's great. Doesn't matter. What the letter said was, you and I can figure out why your home didn't sell. Let's get together and do that. And then they'd let me come over and we talk to them. And you know what? I didn't get 600 listings a month. I only got about 11. But it doesn't matter. It's all a numbers game, isn't it? Some of them would love to have you come over and talk to them about putting it back on the market. And those are the ones you want. And those are the ones I got. And then we put it on the market. And then I would go in and talk to them about primarily what? Price. I'd say, you know, folks, there's a lot of little things we can do here. We could do this, 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 and this, and this. Oh, that's a great idea. But also we need to focus on the price. A lot of the people I would talk to would say, is that all you think it's really going to sell for? And I'd say yes. And they'd say, well, you know what? That's kind of what we thought too. But the listing agent came in with this higher figure, and who are we? We thought they knew what they were doing. And we certainly would have liked to have had the higher figure, but we think you're right. That's probably all we thought it was. That's all we thought it was worth too. And they'd list it. Or they'd say something like, you're the first agent that's ever told us the truth. And they were really easy on price. Some of them wouldn't lower the price. We'd put it back up at the same price anyway. Or maybe just a little bit lower, which was still too high. And then I'd ask them for price reduction later, and some of them wouldn't sell it. They'd expire again. Sources of listings, you might consider expireds. Now, not every one of you are going to want to do it. That's okay. And some markets, like St. George, you couldn't work just solely expireds anyway, could you? It's too small. You couldn't survive. You'd have to work expireds and 1 or 2 or 3 other things, wouldn't you? What about for sale by owners? A lot of people in our business will not work a for sale by owner. They will not work them because why would I go get beat up by this person who wants to put their house up for sale? They have 30,000 other agents contacting them all the time, and I don't want to work them. But let me tell you the truth of for sale by owners. They've already been on the market once before it expires. If you say, well, I'll work expires, but I work FSBOs, you're talking about the same people in many, many cases. The other truth is other agents are not working them. When the big wandering minstrel gurus come to town and they have a room full of 400 agents, Roger Butcher is one that does this regularly. Roger gets up and he says, okay, How many people in this room consistently and religiously work FSBOs with an organized effort on a consistent basis? 4 hands will go up out of 400 people. Oh, there are people that contact FSBOs, but they don't work them. If you lived in an area and there's a FSBO sign on your way home, and you've been hounded by trainers like me or your managers who have said, work those FSBOs, then you might stop in and give them one chance. There was a broker back east that got up in sales meeting one day and he said, here's a $100 bill. Now I'm going to pin it on the bulletin board. You probably noticed that a block from our office there's a house that just went up for sale by owner. The first one of you guys that gets that listing, you come and get this $100. It's yours. It's a bonus. And then after a day or so went by, the broker started feeling guilty. This probably wasn't even nice to sick all my salespeople after this poor little FSBO. I think I'll go over and apologize. He went over to the home to apologize to the homeowner for what he had done. And he immediately found out that no one from his office had been by. Nobody had gone over there. He asked them if they wanted to put their house on the market. They listed it. Nobody works them. You think everybody else is working them, but very few people do. There are some people that will contact them, but they won't work them. Most will take 5 contacts before they will convert. And most salespeople do 1, maybe 2 contacts. You've got to have a program set up so you have 5 contacts minimum with this FSBO before you can expect anything out of them anyway. Most people just give them a call on the phone. Hi, would you be offended if I came by and looked at your house? No, I don't care. Would you cooperate with me if I brought a buyer? That's about as far as they go. Well, I got that FSBO. He said he'd pay me if I brought him a buyer. That's not what you want. You want the what? Listing. My goodness, if I bring him a buyer, darn right he's going to cooperate with me. There are books in the library you can check out or buy from the bookstores that, how to sell your own home without an agent. And almost every one of those books have a chapter in there that says, now if you really do want to pick an agent later, that's okay, but one real great way to pick an agent is to run a for sale by owners ad. And only the aggressive top agents will come talk to you. Some people have run a FSBO ad with the intention of saying, well, we'll see which agents come by and we'll pick from them. Because if it doesn't work, that's what we'll go with. FSBOs can be a good source of listings, but you got to have a plan. Have at least 5 things you do for a FSBO. I take them this, I show them that, we talk about this, I lend them my video, we do that, we do this. Have a 5-step program or more, maybe an 8-step program. Let me quickly run through some other sources that you might want to think about. What about notices of default? Notices of default, if you remember through pre-licensing school, are a situation where in the public records, some bank or lender has posted public notice that this person is now in the first stages of foreclosure. Once a notice of default is recorded in the public record where anybody can read it, right? In October of last year in Salt Lake County, there were 200 notices of default recorded. 200. A lot of those will refinance some way or another. Or mom or dad will come through and they'll reinstate the loan. Some of those will go all the way through the foreclosure process. But a lot of those will sell. Out of 200, do you think you could find 4 that would list with you in any one given month? That alone would make you $100,000. Now, some of these people don't want to talk to you. Some of these people are going to be in denial. They're going to be hiding. Some of these people you can't even find. They're gone. They're certainly not going to be answering your phone. You're probably going to have to go to the door. Hello? Now, you can use 2 approaches. The direct approach. I see you're in deep financial yogurt. I'm here to help. Or the indirect approach. You know anyone in your neighborhood that might want to sell? Have a buyer wants to move in here, just knocking on houses. You're the only one in the neighborhood I knocked on, but Whichever works for you, I don't care, but you know what? Some of them will list with you. What about farming an area? Geographic farming works. Your very best source of listings we have not discussed yet. It's your own center of influence or sphere of influence. Center of influence, SOI, or some people call it COI, that is your very best source of listings. It's where I got my first listing. My first sale in this business was to my brother-in-law. He didn't want his sister to starve. Besides, he needed a house. So we went out my first week and we found him a house and he bought it. My first listing came from my brother-in-law. He didn't have a house to sell. That was his very first home. I'd sold him the day previous. But he called me and said, there's this guy I know at church that said that he might want to sell. Rick, you might want to give him a call. And I called him and says, hello, Steve, your friend from church says you might want to sell. He says, yeah, come on over and talk to me about it. And I went over and listed his house. My first week got one listing, one sale. Where did it come from? Sphere of influence. These people know you haven't been in the business. They know you were doing something else. I used to work with Steve. He knew that I was working with him, and then I quit and went into real estate. He knew I was brand new, green, but he didn't care. He was my family, and he wanted to help. And he figured, hey, he could probably do it. At least he's licensed by the state. I guess he's okay. And so are you, right? Your sphere of influence, center of influence, will become your best source of business forever. Super hitters, 85% of their business comes out of their sphere of influence. Let these people know you're in business, and let these people know that you need their help. What about farming around signs or working neighborhoods where you've had a house? I call this the one-for-one campaign. One-for-one campaign is every listing should get you one more listing, and geographically, if you listed a house here, within 50 to 100 homes around that house, another house is coming up in the market within 3 weeks. National Association of Realtors has studied this forever, and it always works this way. And you better be getting that. Go ahead.
Does that apply?
The question is, does that happen also demographically within a company? If the company is large enough, yes. In other words, statistically, for everyone that puts something up, there is a pool or a universe of numbers that somebody else will also be putting a house up for sale. And that could work in a company too, but we know it definitely works in a neighborhood, and that's something you can clearly define. Sometimes it's harder to get the company list, but if you can, work the company list too. But the one-for-one campaign says that if I get a listing in a neighborhood, I know another one's coming up, and who wants it? I do. Talking to the neighbors. What do you talk to them about? Just listed? Hey, I've just listed a home in your area, and do you know any buyers that might want to buy it? And what are they going to probably say? Can't think of a soul. Well, that's fine, because that's not really what you're there for anyway. Now, occasionally they may say, yes, I know a buyer that I really want my mom to live nearer to me, and that's great. That sounds like her price range. Maybe I can get her in there. Sometimes that happens. As you're about to leave, you say, oh, by the way, when are you folks thinking about doing what? Selling. And then if they say, well, we're thinking about putting it up like real quick or whatever next spring, then maybe that's your person. You find them by sweeping the neighborhoods. You invite them to the open house. You tell them about price reductions. When the house is sold, you go back and you say, my marketing efforts have generated so much enthusiasm for your neighborhood. I've got other people that want to live here, but I sold that house. Do you want to sell yours? You keep going back and you'll eventually find them. This is a wonderful source of listing, one that most people don't do. But if you did one-for-one, think about it, you double your business. One of the most profound sources is called seller SOI. What's the seller SOI? Well, the seller has a sphere of influence too. You ask the seller for the names of his friends and associates here in the community. And you send a letter out telling his friends that their friends' home's now for sale, and do they know a buyer for it? And you put a little fact sheet on the home in there with this little letter. And you show the seller the letter you're going to send out. And it's just a real non-threatening letter that says, your friend has listed their property with me, and I need your help in getting it sold. And so we'd like to thank you in advance. Do you know of anyone that may want to buy it? Please help me get your friend's house sold. And here's a flyer on it. Pass it around. We'd really appreciate your help. And then what do? You call them up and you say, did you get the stuff? And they say, yeah. Do you need some more? Well, they'd say yes or no. It doesn't matter. You say, well, let me drop a couple more cards in the mail to you in case you run across somebody. And, oh, by the way, when are you folks moving? See, that's almost like a referral. Their friend said, you're the realtor of choice. That's a very strong method. Hey, there's a dozen other different sources of listings that are all good. You'll pick them up out of 10 or 20 different things, like working people that live in high-end apartments and maybe want to buy a house because rents have gone up so much now. By doing all kinds of things. Your lenders can be good sources of listings for you too. You'd be surprised. Sometimes people are coming in and talk to a lender about financing a new home they're building, but they've got another one to sell. Sometimes they can reciprocate and give you listings too. What you need to do is to identify some sources of listings and then develop programs that will help you go out and get them. Because without listings, you're essentially out of the business.